Welcome back, everybody. I'm about ready to operate on the Willys here. The operation is to get the engine removed from the truck and get it on a pallet and mail it off to be rebuilt. I am currently draining the fluids. So we've already removed and installed this engine once in this truck. I didn't have too much trouble with it then. I don't expect we'll have too much trouble with it now. I'm not going to make you watch me do this whole thing. I've already done it once. My goal is to have this completely done, engine on a pallet, ready to mail within 4 days. So I'll bring you guys back from time to time just to update you on the progress, and we'll go from there. Well, it's about 3.5 hours later. We've got the hood off, the radiator, the fan shroud, all the electrical, all the plumbing, fluids are drained. Basically, the only thing left are the front two motor mounts and all the bolts on the bellows housing. It's not that late in the day today, but I'm running out of energy, so we're going to save that for tomorrow. We got some of the parts back here on the bench, some of the hardware. We've got the battery on the trickle charger. This battery was made in 2018. I don't know about you guys, but I usually don't have batteries last much more than 5 or 6 years. When we're done with the truck, I think it would be wise to put a brand new battery in it, just so we're not wondering about this one, because I'd be surprised if this has another year left in it. But for the meantime, we'll try to keep it as healthy as we can. If you guys are interested, I'll put some extra content at the end of this video, and I'll show you what exactly happened to the engine, and I'll show you how I figured that out. Good morning, everybody. It's going to be another beautiful day. A little bit cold. It's about 41 degrees out this morning, but the good news is it's going to be in the mid-70s here in about 3 days. So I think winter is finally coming to an end, and I am ready for some warmer weather. So for these motor mounts, rather than remove this big nut here and try to lift the engine off the post, I just like to remove these two bolts. That way the engine can immediately come forward rather than having to lift it up first and then forward to clear this post. It's a little bit more of a hassle, but I think it's a lot easier to do it that way. I'm going to get the starter removed first, then these front two motor mounts, and then we'll get all the bolts on the bell housing and see if we can get this motor up and out. All right, I think I have all the bolts removed. I think everything is disconnected. Let's give this a try. All right, I've got it successfully removed from the truck. But now we need to remove basically everything on this side of the engine, because none of this is pertinent to the engine rebuild itself, right? This external stuff. So let's get all this removed and we'll go from there. All right, Mary, if you're watching out there, I'm counting on you to remember how all this stuff goes back together. All right, the only thing left is the clutch and pressure plate, and then we're done with the disassembly. Right here is where the crack is. I'm just pointing this out to the builder. I know he would have found it anyway, but I wanted to show him exactly where it was. And again, I've got some extra content at the end of this video talking about the engine failure in depth. So if you want to hang around for that, please do. All right, everything is done, and the motor is ready to be palletized. Took me about 2.5 hours today, so with the 3.5 hours yesterday, about 6 hours total from start to finish, so I guess that's not too bad. But now I have to get the pallet, get this strapped down to the pallet, and get it in my truck. This might sound a little counterintuitive, but I'm actually hoping that we find a failed head gasket here. So if you're gonna watch the content at the end of the video, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but besides the external crack that we could see with our eyes, I was also getting coolant out the exhaust pipe and coolant into the crankcase. As you might know already, some cracks in engine blocks can be repaired. So let's say, just hypothetically, the crack that we have in this block can be repaired, and the only other thing that's wrong with the engine is the head gasket. Because failed head gaskets can produce the same symptoms that we're getting. You can get coolant into the crankcase, and you can get coolant out the exhaust. But if the head gasket is intact, unfortunately, that probably means either the crack that we're aware of is deeper in the block and more severe than it looks, and or there might be another crack or multiple other cracks internal to the engine that we cannot see with our eyes. If that is the case, then that almost certainly means this block cannot be repaired. I've already discussed this with the builder. He is well aware of our situation. Plan A, of course, will be to attempt to fix this block, and then plan B will be to replace this block with another L134 block. Anyway, that whole explanation is why I'm hoping to find a failed head gasket here. And after looking it over quite carefully, I am certain that there are no failures in this head gasket. So that might be bad news for us. That might mean that there are more internal cracks inside the engine, and that block will have to be replaced. And for those of you who don't know, this motor is considered a flathead motor. And a flathead just means that the entire valve train is in the engine block versus the cylinder head. So when you hear the terms flathead versus overhead valve, for example, if you had an overhead valve engine, valves would be on top of the cylinder head facing down. Anyway, now you know what a flathead is. Valves are in the engine block and not in the cylinder head. So we're going to put this back on the way we found it. So my plan is to lay this down this way, right in the center, and then strap it down. I got 4 ratchet straps, that should be sufficient. And I'm just gonna put a piece of thick cardboard down. It will assist me in positioning the engine on the pallet, and it'll also be a little bit of cushion for the engine when it takes this trip across country. So put this here. I'm going to lean it on this side because I don't think there's anything over here that we can hurt. This tin worries me a little bit, but I think it's going to hit here and here. Yeah, everything looks okay, but this backing plate is touching and there is a little bit of pressure on it. So I'm going to see if I can get this 2x4 underneath the block just to raise it up a little bit and take some pressure off this backing plate. Yeah. Hey, that actually worked. You can see this is free now. It's not binding up anymore. We don't want to bend that. So I'm actually happy with how that is. It feels really good and solid, and nothing is getting damaged by laying that way. I've got two more coming across this way, and I fastened a flat board here on this side just to cover the hooks and prevent these boards from pulling up from the pressure from the hooks. So I'm happy with that. That's good and secure. So the next trick will be getting it in the truck. Unfortunately, I can't use the engine lift to lift this. The footprint of the pallet is just too wide. That wouldn't work. So I have a multi-step plan here that I think is going to work. I'm going to use my front loader to get it into the back of the truck, but it's going to be a little bit of a trick just getting this into the bucket of the front loader. So I'm going to go ahead and film this whole thing, and you guys can laugh at me if it doesn't work, but I think I have a plan figured out. So let's give this a try. Now the plan is to use the engine lift to raise the front of the pallet and engine off the ground enough where I can drive the bucket from the loader underneath it and then lower it back down right into the bucket. I decided to go with the flatbed instead of the pickup truck, simply because it wasn't going to fit the way I wanted it to in the pickup. It wouldn't fit this way in the pickup, but it would if I flipped it long ways. But in that position, I could not have rotated it in the truck to facilitate easy unloading at the other end at the transport company, because you have to get the forks in this way, right? You can't get them in the other way. So the flatbed trailer might be a little bit overkill, but it's going to make things way easier for me. It's also going to make things easy for the shipping company. So I met my goal. I got this done over the course of 3 days and probably about 8 hours, maybe 8.5 hours worth of work total. So all the heavy lifting for me is done. All I have to do now is strap it to the trailer and get it ready for transport. So here's the extra content that I promised you about the diagnosis, evaluation, and demonstration about what happened with this engine and how I figured it out. I recorded all this a few months ago, but I wanted to save it because I thought you guys might find this interesting. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this. I've been working on the truck for 5 or 6 months now, roughly, but we're getting to the point now where I am starting to run it quite a bit more. Anyway, the first clue that there might be something wrong I noticed at the tailpipe. And you might think that's kind of a strange place to start when we suspect a crack in the engine block, but the tailpipe is exactly where I noticed the first clue. Right now the truck is completely cold. I pushed it out of the shop. I'm going to start it and let it run, and I'll show you what's going on here. If you have consistent white exhaust, that usually means that you're burning water or you're burning coolant. That means that coolant from the radiator is somehow getting into the combustion chambers, and then you can see that when it comes out the exhaust because the smoke will be white. Well, that is what we have going on here. And that is an easier thing to see in the summertime, because in the wintertime when the weather is cold and you start your vehicle first thing in the morning, there's going to be some condensation inside the exhaust pipe, and when you start the engine and the exhaust pipe starts to heat up, it's going to start to burn off and evaporate that condensation, and that is going to come out the tailpipe as white smoke. And it looks exactly the same as if you're burning coolant or water from the radiator. There may even be a little bit of actual water that drips from the tailpipe, and that is also normal in the wintertime. And again, that doesn't take very long. That should burn off in somewhere between 30 seconds and a few minutes. So this truck has been blowing some white smoke out the exhaust pipe, but the only time I've ever been starting the truck has been during this winter during cold temperatures. And what finally got my attention the other day after we fixed the tailgate and we inspected all the brakes during that video, I ran the truck for a little while and I come back around here and it's still blowing the white smoke out the exhaust. And then I look down and there's moisture, what looks like water, dripping out the tailpipe. After the truck's been running for 10 minutes, we really shouldn't be getting any moisture out of there at all, or any white smoke by that time. And we were getting both. So I came up to the radiator just to check the level of the coolant. And I know you can't tell from the camera angle here, but the coolant is down about that much from when we originally filled it up several months ago. And that tells me that we have coolant loss. But this is a sealed system. There shouldn't be any change at all to the coolant level. It should be exactly the same. So, okay, that tells us that we're losing coolant somewhere, but it's not going on the ground below the truck. It's not leaking from the radiator. It's not leaking from the radiator hoses, and it's not leaking from the water pump. So if we're not losing coolant externally, that leads us to the guess that we might be losing coolant internally. And when we start talking about internal coolant loss, the first thing that comes to my mind is usually going to be the head gasket. So then I think, well, shoot, that's kind of a drag, but it's no big deal, especially on a flathead engine. 2 or 3 hours worth of work and maybe 80 bucks for a head gasket and you're good to go. So at that point, that's what I was thinking. It was probably a failed head gasket. And I thought, well, to be thorough, we might as well start looking around and checking the engine block itself for obvious failures like external cracks and things like that, and don't see any on the left side. Of course, you can't see 100% of the engine block. You can't see behind the cylinder head back there and the rear of the engine, and you can't see some of the front of it, and you can't even see all of the bottom of it. From what I can see, there's nothing going on over there. And then I come over here. This side is even harder to see than the other side because there's more stuff over here. But I look down and try to get a shot of it here. Yeah, there it is. Right there is a discolored spot. So I said, okay, let's start the truck. And that discolored spot started to weep moisture. Only out of that spot. That moisture was coming from inside the engine block. So basically what we have is a hairline fracture of the engine block right there on the outside that we can see. It doesn't leak when the truck is not running. It only starts to leak when you start the engine and the engine gets warm. And I will demonstrate that in just a couple minutes. If we have a failure in the outside of the block that we can see with our eyes, and we can actually see moisture coming out of that failure, that is a probable indication that that crack is also internal, and that is allowing coolant into the combustion chambers where it's getting burned, where it's coming out the tailpipe as white smoke and literal liquid. So after the course of a few months of me running the truck more regularly and seeing that white smoke out of the exhaust pipe, that's what prompted me to start looking at things more closely. So I'm going to start the truck now and demonstrate what I have been seeing lately out of the exhaust pipe, just so you can see it too. I'm going to put a pan under here to catch any liquid that might drip out so we can see exactly how much it is. You can already see we've got this much. You can see even at idle we're getting a little bit of white smoke, but again, it's cold outside. It's like 35 degrees right now. So this would otherwise be normal. What's not normal is the amount of liquid that's coming out of the tailpipe. And then when I go to rev it up, you can really see the white smoke is evident. So I'm going to let the truck idle for a while, let it get up to operating temperature, and to demonstrate that this condition here doesn't get better. After 6 minutes, we can already see some of the liquid escaping from the engine block from this little crack here. All right, that was a 15-minute run. I think you can see what I was describing. This is way too much. And when you stop the truck, the water, of course, stops coming out. And that moisture from that hairline crack right there, that will dry up in a few minutes and just go back to being kind of a dull, dark spot that you can easily overlook. Another thing that can happen when you have coolant contamination into the combustion chambers or somewhere else in the block is the coolant can get into the crankcase, and you can oftentimes see that on your dipstick. See right there and there and right there on the tip. That's like a consistency of a white, like grease almost. So that white stuff on the dipstick is more evidence that we're getting coolant into the crankcase somehow. The coolant will either manifest itself as that kind of white, greasy stuff, or it will completely mix with the oil and turn the oil into like an opaque milkshake color. So at this point, I am 99% sure, you probably are too, that we have a failure in the engine block. But because I try to be thorough with all this stuff, I want to run one more test on this engine, and that's going to be to add some fluorescent dye to the radiator. I'll let the truck run for another 15 minutes, and then we'll be able to determine 100% that we are actually getting liquid from the radiator out the exhaust pipe and liquid from the radiator out that hairline crack in the block. All right, here's the stuff. Coolant system fluorescent tracer dye, 1 ounce. The instructions say to use about 1 ounce per gallon, so I guess I'll put pretty much the whole thing in there. All right, here we go. I've got the drip pan set up like before, and I've also got a white mat down there, so hopefully we'll be able to see the color of it. I let the truck run for about 15 minutes, and then I drove it around the property a little bit, so it's good and warm. We got a lot of liquid out the exhaust pipe, and I'm here in the shop with our pad. Some of the water ran off it already, but there's still plenty on here, so we're going to use our black light. Yellow lensed glasses help to see the fluorescent green, but I can see it here without using them. Yep, the dye definitely made it all the way out the exhaust pipe. Let me try to put the glasses over the camera and see if you guys can see it that way. Can you see it? Oh wow. I set the white pad on the stool over here for just a couple of minutes, and it left a big green spot. There's without the glasses, and there's with. All right, let's go check the engine block. All right, there's where the crack is, and I'll turn on the UV flashlight right now. Well, the iPhone is picking up that fluorescent without the yellow glasses over the lens, so that's nice. I don't have to try to monkey around with that, but you can clearly see right where it's leaking. I think if we would have run the engine for more than 15 minutes, like say we drove the truck for an hour, I think there would have been enough liquid coming out of that crack to run down the side of the block. Well, that about wraps up the diagnosis, evaluation, and demonstration of the engine failure. Now you guys know as much about it as I do. I probably won't have an update on this engine for 2 or 3 months, but I'm gonna keep going on the truck. There are several other things that still need to be addressed. So I hope to see everybody on the next video. Thanks for the support, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care, everybody.